Ukrainian economy explained, before and after. So you guys have been watching the war unfold between Ukraine and Russia. And many of you have been thinking that if Ukraine is at war for such a long time, then what is the economical status in Ukraine? Is Ukraine running well or not in an economical state? Well, we all think that Ukraine is a real hero, but at what cost? We will discuss everything today. Hello everyone! Welcome to Country Economies Explained, a media channel that allows you to find out the reasons behind the economic situations of countries. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, press the bell icon to never miss an update from us. That being said, let's begin. So, more than 100 days have passed since Russia began its military invasion of Ukraine. While the stalemate in Ukraine's east continues, with a fight of attrition now underway, the war's economic impact on the country has been devastating. Well, the International Monetary Fund, which is also known as IMF, forecasted that Ukraine's per capita GDP would expand by 3.6% this year, despite Russia's increasing buildup of troops along the country's border in 2021. In an April assessment, the World Bank predicted that the world could cause Ukraine's economy to fall by up to 45%, while sanctions would cause Russia's economy to plummet by 11.1%. Then say, the war is also wreaking havoc on Europe's emerging and developing economies, a region that was already on the verge of seeing an economic recession this year due to the pandemic's continued repercussions. This is exactly why the World Bank mentioned their warning in a projection released on April 10th. Moreover, apart from the economy's collapse, the war has caused price and interest rates to surge in Ukraine. According to the Financial Times, the National Bank of Ukraine's latest data on consumer inflation showed that the rate had risen to 17% in May, up from 16.4% in April, 13.7% in March, which originally was 10.7% in February before the war started. However, for an already demand-depleted economy, this measure will make borrowing prohibitively expensive. Borrowing costs have reached their highest possible level in Europe, and it's the highest since September 2015, when the country's economy was still reeling from Russia's takeover of Crimea. Moreover, the National Bank of Ukraine explained the large rate hike by claiming that a lower rise would have no substantial impact on the financial and economic system throughout warfare, due to the probably limited effect on asset prices. However, a tiny rate hike, they argued, would dissuade investors and cause depositors to take a wait-and-see strategy. The conflict in Ukraine will have a greater influence on global recovery from the pandemic's shocks. The World Trade Organization predicted in April that the war will reduce overall economic growth by as much as 1.3% this year, and lower global trade growth from 4.7% to between 2.4% and 3%. So what are the economic prospects for Ukraine? The short answer, it doesn't look good. The long answer, well, according to Ukraine's Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, stated in late April that his country requires $5 billion per month in fiscal assistance until at least September, as well as $600 billion in total for reconstruction work. Despite the prominence of minerals and metals and economic facilities, Ukraine is predominantly an agrarian economy, having been dubbed Europe's breadbasket and one of the world's top exporters of wheat before Russian blockades brought its supply chains to a halt. These blockades include the port of Odessa, and its effects can be seen in wheat prices across Western Europe. We don't have to look very far for an example. Egypt, a major importer, was one of the countries hit hardest by the conflict and has been looking for wheat options for Russia and Ukraine since February. Back when Ukraine gained independence in 1991, there were hopes that it would become a prosperous free market economy and a full-time member of the European and Euro-Atlantic countries in the near future. It was intended that the European Union, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, you might have known, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development would welcome the largest country geographically in Europe and the fifth largest European nation by population. However, Ukraine never lived up to those expectations. Instead, because of its geopolitical circumstances, historical burdens, and institution, building and policy blunders, it is viewed as an outcast, maybe as a sick man of Europe, and maybe even at a potentially failing state. But Ukraine has prospered economically in tandem with the rest of the area. As a result, growth rates haven't been particularly low, but they follow the economically disastrous 1990s and aren't based on a solid foundation. Moreover, Russia has been providing Ukraine with low-cost gas for years, while Ukraine's export prices have risen quickly. As I've mentioned before, we all believe Ukraine is a true hero, but really at what cost? The majority of Americans back Ukraine in its existential fight against Russia. Many people see the struggle for democracy and sovereignty as a parallel to our own. The global appreciation for Ukraine's tenacity in the face of overwhelming odds has resulted in a bipartisan legislative agreement to transfer $53 billion in military and economic help to Kyiv. However, given the interruptions in Ukraine and Russia, Europe's breadbaskets, the agreement is fragile. Especially if the prices of necessities like fuel and shortly food continue to climb, according to a new Associated Press and ORC poll. Higher prices are beginning to signify decreased approval for sanctions against Russia, despite the fact that the war is not the primary cause of the country's skyrocketing inflation. And on the American side of things, for the third month in a row, the government and its citizens were asked to pick between sanctioning Russia as effectively as possible even if it harms the US economy, and reducing the damage to US economy even if sanctions on Russia are less successful. By a margin of 51% to 45% in May, Americans preferred restricting penalties to the most effective sanctions. While this still reflects a high level of support for the Biden government's strategic approach, it's the polar opposite of April's numbers, and even lower than March's, when 55% preferred the most effective severe penalties and 42% preferred less effective sanctions to limit economic damage to the US. Also, there are political concerns about keeping the unilateral sanctions and aid to Ukraine in place. In addition to the financial ones, while most Republicans in Congress have been staunch supporters, an increasing number are speaking out against the latest assistance plan, including former President Donald Trump, who, along with 11 GOP senators and 57 GOP representatives, voted against it. If the GOP wins the majority in Congress in November's midterm elections, the economic component of the US strategy, and by implication, the Western strategy, may be jeopardized. This will be very bad news, especially for Ukraine. Let us know in the comments below which one do you think is a better choice. Such a result may be factored into Russian President Vladimir Putin's estimations. Also, while it is true that Ukraine is difficult to beat, more and more civilians will die if they refuse to succumb to Russian aggression. Fighting to the death is not the same as conceding defeat, even if the conclusion may appear to be the same on the surface. As Winston Churchill said, nations that went down battling rose again, but those that surrendered tamely were finished. Better to die on one's feet than to live on one's knees, as the ancient Greeks put it. The Ukrainians are teaching the rest of the world about perseverance, courage, solidarity, and true patriotism. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs expanded external access to information about Ukraine by creating a user-friendly website that not only kept track of events as they happened, but also gave important political, social, and cultural backgrounds. The MFA also decided to test branding initiatives aimed at portraying Ukraine's national character in terms and visuals that would appeal to Western audiences. The Ukrainian Institute's following work, which is establishing a lively global lexicon of a Ukrainian culture and history, is based on these early efforts to elevate Ukraine's visibility. To gain international credibility, Ukraine would have to go beyond the polarization of its Russian and Ukrainian linguistic and cultural traditions, which Putin still exploits to this day. One of Ukraine's most attractive soft power features, as the work of the Ukrainian Institute attests, is the portrayal of its national character as a fusion of these legacies, and its ethnic and cultural variety as a source of strength rather than conflict. So, as we can see, Ukraine's economy is really on a downward, slippery slope, one which isn't ending and can soon take the country to a point of no recovery. So the war has cost the Ukrainian government and its economy everything: sweat, blood, heritage, and most importantly, its economy. But as we saw, Ukraine is not the only one suffering. Countries like Turkey and Egypt that rely on Ukraine exports for food are also suffering. The best we can hope for is the war to end as soon as possible. But even then, Ukraine might have to build its economy from the ground up. And that's it for today's video. We hope you liked the video. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button and do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more such videos. And this is us signing off for now. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, peace.